Yes, let's get into it, man. Jim, it's wonderful to meet you, sir. Thank you for taking a
You as
minute out.
well. No worries.
Yes, sir. So let's begin our journey into your life and your good work by asking you this. 5 years ago, this pandemic was raging. So many things were changing. How did you make it through the global pandemic, and how has it radiated into 2025 for you?
Wow, that's a that's a terrific question, and also thanks, man, for having me on. This is
Yes,
really
sir.
a treasure.
Yeah.
Um, that pandemic was really weird because we were in the Seattle market, and my wife came to me one day, and I mean this was our forever home out west of Seattle, and she came to me one day and she said, I think I need to go back to the Rocky Mountains where the sun shines and the and for some health reasons, some other reasons, we split, we left Seattle. And when we went back there, we just realized that there was a tremendous difference between what we were experiencing in the Boise market and the Seattle or Western Washington. And I point to politics, point to whatever, but it was just there was a much freer, looser attitude out in the Boise market. So
Yeah.
we actually fared quite nicely.
Yeah. I hear that a lot. I do.
Yeah,
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. There's several titles that are out there, but I want to know exactly
yeah.
if I put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds at career day and the kid in the
Uh-huh.
back of the room that's notoriously curious is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
Wow, now I influence people, hopefully for the better. And I do that on several ways. I speak from stages a lot. My first book came out. It's the first of a three-book deal with Morgan James Publishing. And I also help business leaders build back their companies to the culture that they want. So I call myself sometimes the recovering CEO because I look around and there's nobody to help anymore. I do have some help. That's a bit facetious. So sorry, Henry. But no, I think that it's incumbent upon me at 66 years old to look around and I'm not the retiring guy. I don't want to play golf that much. I love fishing, but not all the time. And there's lots and lots of stuff. I've been given incredible freedom. And what I choose to do with it is to try and make the world a little bit better place.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. What did you want to be when you were 12 years old? What was
Oh
your dream
man.
job?
You know, this last week we heard about Jim Marshall, who was a famous Minnesota Viking, one of the Purple People Eaters, passed away at 87 years old. And when I was 8, I stood across a signature table from Jim Marshall. They played basketball, and he came around to my hometown during the off season. That's kind of how they made money because they didn't get paid a lot, you know. And
Yeah.
this is the mid 60s, and he said, "Son, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I just looked at him. I had this glowing face, and I said, I want to be a Minnesota Viking." And he looked at me in all sincerity. He said, "You can be anything you want to be." Now, he didn't realize that I was going to top out at 5'9" and be slow and
Yeah.
and much weaker. But he was the NFL's Iron Man. He was a icon, and that was an opportunity to build confidence. So, truthfully, I wanted to be a Minnesota Viking, but
Wow, yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome. So talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and how these elements of you being being in business, being successful,
Yeah.
being a speaker, being an author, what were all of these seeds that were planted that harvested into who you are?
It's very interesting. I was born in a little town called Watertown, South Dakota, back then about 15,000 people in the northeast corner of South Dakota. And really an idyllic, wonderful, dang near perfect Leave It to Beaver life. And 8 kids in our family, and we went out in the morning, and we were either back for supper or when the streetlights came on, whichever was appropriate.
Yeah.
And so as I look back on that, and I reflect this some in the book, I just like I couldn't ask for any more. I did, however, have some difficulties in that I was a stutterer when I was young. And I also had kind of I'll call it a math dyslexia. So I didn't really learn math the way other people did. And when I was in the second grade, this nun at our school went to my mom and she said, "We're going to send your son to Redfield, South Dakota, to the State School for Retarded Citizens,
Yeah.
retarded children."
Yeah.
And my mom's like, No, you're not.
Right.
And from that point on, I got some interest from some people who were actually involved in building my confidence and shaping me and this went on throughout my life. And there's people who, when I talk about it in Building Men, which is the book, I talk about people who invested time in me. They didn't have to do that. They didn't actually have the time to do that, but they did it because it was the right thing to do. And I'm not responsible for what I become. A lot of them and my savior are. So I mean, I'm like literally good with that, with them taking credit.
That's awesome. My son Miles is on the spectrum, and he's had speech therapy, and he's had different
Mm.
therapies and developmental issues that he's had to overcome in his life. And I just realized that anybody that has any kind of challenge like that has to work extra hard. You can't just, glide by. And I think about with what you're saying, there's a part of you that probably just knew that you had to do things in a different way.
Yeah, yeah, and not only that, my father-in-law, so I was headed up to Alaska. I was a welder. I was headed to Alaska, and I was going to weld in the pipeline. I was going to make big money, and and I walked by. I was in Proctor, Minnesota. I walked by, and I looked over, and there's this girl in a gold jumpsuit. And the first, I was 20 years old, and the first thought that jumps into my head is I'm going to marry her. Well, that was 45 years ago. I never went to Alaska until I was in my 40s, and it has been an amazing experience. But her father-in-law, when I went to ask him for his daughter's hand in marriage, he said, "Where are you going to college?" And I'm like, anywhere you want, sir. If that's the price of entry, I'm all in.
Yeah.
And the result of that was he's like the guy who said, "You can do this. You can do this." I went to college having never taken algebra because of the math difficulties I had.
Yeah.
So no math, no algebra, no calculus, no trig, no none of that stuff. And so my wife literally tutored me through college.
Wow, that's amazing. So let
Yeah.
me ask you this. Who's been that hero? Who's been that inspirational force that's allowed you to not only be successful, but to evolve into where you are today?
Well, my grandpa had such an amazing impact on my life because in our little town, he was bigger than life. He was the man. And this dude was 5'6" on a good day and a rotund little pot belly, but he was that entrepreneur who made it through and built stuff through the Great Depression. And when you're trading chickens for services and things like that, it's a tough way to come up. But he built a business that was really unmatched in the state that he was from, and he became a national leader. But anyway, he took me fishing, he took me hunting, and he invested. He had 40 grandkids, and he invested time in me, like mano a mano, one on one, and that made a significant difference. So if I had to point to hero number one, it would be my grandpa.
So in the realm of business, it's almost like sport. We revere these minds that have built things, massive
Yeah.
things. Who has been that business leader that you've looked up to, that you've emulated some of the traits that have made them successful?
Wow. Leroy Lundell of back then it was PSM Products. Now it's Lundell Manufacturing in Plymouth, Minnesota. Props to him. Family business, still in the family. Leroy was the consummate gentleman. He's one of the gang I call the 1925ers. They were born in 1925, and all four of them in one way or another lifted me up. But Leroy taught me what it looked like to be a gentleman and to be a salesman who walked in to another business and solved problems for your customer, not to be the hype guy who walked in and said, "Buy me, buy this," but to actually walk in and solve their problems. And his son, in many ways, Tom Lundell, like that, was a very influential person. I mean, Leroy was an elder at his church. He was always in a press shirt and a jacket and tie. And this is a guy who could have afforded a driver and a limo. and and the dude drove he like felt like it was a splurge to buy a Ford LTD. And I think his kids actually at the towards the end of his life talk him into a Cadillac. But he's a guy that is just amazing. And again, he invested in me, and it's not like I was anything special or I deserved it. I wanted to learn, and I think people see that when you ask someone to mentor you, you're actually not only doing them a favor, you're adding clarity because they get to choose where they spend their time.
Yeah.
And if you're at the front of the line saying, I will work hard if you'll invest in me, makes all the difference. All the difference in the world.
So, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Wow. The best advice I've ever gotten. I've never had that question before, but that's an amazing question, man.
Yeah.
I would say if you go back and okay, so I'm sitting beside it's a Friday afternoon. Leroy calls me into his office, and he says, "Sit down. I'm going to go out and I'm going to head for I'm going to head for Des Moines, Iowa, on Sunday, so I can start selling right out of the gate on Monday." And he sits me on the other side of his desk, and he said, JT, there were several gyms there. So he called me JT. He says, let me see your business card. And I hand it to him, and I'm pretty proud of it. I just out of college, I got a business card with my name on it. I've worked my way through the warehouse, through estimating, and now I'm going into sales, which is my trajectory, man. And he looks at it and he hands it back to me, and he says, whose name is on that card, JT? And I'm like, see, mine is Leroy. Isn't that cool? I mean, yeah, I didn't say isn't that cool. I said mine is Leroy. He goes, son, you just made a mistake. My name is on that card. And this company, everybody who works here, their name is on that card. So if I hear of you going into a bar alone, or if I hear of you stepping out on your wife while you're on the road in my car with my card, I'm gonna fire you. Do you understand?
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. And I revered him. So it was more of, yes, sir. Now, today, there's probably a lot of people who said, that was ruthless. That was rude. You can't do that. That was the best piece of advice I ever got.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. Yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes tough love is the way to go. It's just like with parenting, you know?
Yeah.
You got to get in there and lay it down. Um,
Yeah.
the one thing about where you're at in life, at your age and with your success and what you've done, is it requires risk. Anybody that's good at business and making decisions has to risk. What's the
Sure.
biggest risk that you've taken in your career arc?
My kid came home one time, and back when I was welding, I was working on towers as well. So my kid thought that was kind of romantic, and he started working on towers right out of high school. And he came home. He came home. Actually, I went out to his job site, and I thought somebody's going to get killed here because these guys are not doing it very well, or not doing it very safe. And so he came home one night, and I kind of stuck my spurs into him pretty good. I was like, you gotta quit, man. You gotta leave this. Somebody's gonna get hurt bad there. And and he said, I like my job. I'm making good money. We're trying to do it right. Why would I do that? And I said, because you have to. And he fought back a little bit, but one night he came home at the supper table and he says, "Hey, if you're so smart, let's just do it ourselves." So I cashed in my management incentive plan. I cashed in my 401k. I didn't remortgage my house, but we were strapped,
Yeah.
and we started a little telecom business that turned it into a couple of hundred employees, and then we merged it together with another company, turned into 1,000 employees almost.
Wow.
And looking back, every misstep that I had in business in my career along the way prepared me for that. And so those mistakes are what I call the tuition that is the great lesson, the great teacher. Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
talking about your grandfather being successful and having a large family and investing that time in you,
Hmm.
because there's something special about that when you're a grandkid and that
Oh,
happens.
yeah.
But obviously, there has to be some level of finding equilibrium between your
Hmm.
business and your personal life. What has
Yeah.
been that overarching philosophy for you every day to wake up, to do the best job you can, and to take care of your soul and your family?
That is if I had the answer to that question, I would bottle it and sell it. But seriously, in my younger career, I was on an airplane and I had started out the week in Seattle and I'd gone Phoenix, Salt Lake, Denver, Chicago, DC. And I was flying back over Chicago on my way to San Francisco so I could go to Narita because I was doing international business. And I was a hotshot, man. I was like the dude. And everybody like pumped me up and revered me and praised me because I was on a roll. And I looked down at the lights of Chicago and I checked my watch and I thought, I'm missing my daughter's swim meet. I quit. And I walked into my boss, and this is in like September, and I walked into him at the end of December and said, you know what? I'm going to leave at the end of the year. I'll give you till April or May or whatever you need. I'm not leaving you. I'm leaving me because the problem is not you. The problem is right here. And I can't do this job halfway, so I'm not going to do the job.
Yeah,
And they offered me lots of stuff to stick around, but I kind of stuck to my guns. And I don't know if there's a perfect mix,
yeah,
but if if it is pricking your heart a little bit and you are seeing something you don't like, there's probably a good indication that maybe the priorities might be a little upside down.
yep,
And it's like an airplane. If you're flying and wind is pushing you off course, you can make a lot of little corrections, or you can make like I had to. I had to look at my watch over Chicago and say, this is insane. And I had to make this huge correction. But if you can make a lot of little corrections that are timely, hey, tell your boss that today's the day I'm going to go to that baseball game, that swim meet, that water
yep,
polo. I don't care what it is. I'm going to, Boy Scout, I'm going to go spend a little time with the people whose lives I can have impact on. And if they have
absolutely.
a problem with that, you might have the wrong boss.
That's it. I totally agree.
Yeah.
So let's say you have a dream tonight, you run into the 18-year-old version of you, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've lived, the wisdom you've gained. What
Yeah.
advice would you impart?
Start your business sooner.
Yeah,
Don't start it later. Like I say, everything prepared me, but tuition comes in two forms. The first is kind of a self-taught. It's ouch, that hurt, training by trauma, and it's a great teacher. The lessons are kind of expensive.
yeah,
You actually get the test before you get the lesson, and so but that is a de facto kind of the best way to learn. But the cheapest way to learn is to take information that you get from others, like from Leroy, and then put that into practice. It takes a lot longer, and people have to be willing to give it. But that is, like I said, the lesson comes before the test,
yeah,
and that kind of training is less expensive. But I would say, man, dive in. If you're entrepreneurial, dive in as soon as you can when you got nothing to lose.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's say you walk into a room of everybody that's known you in a business sense throughout your life. You swim through that group of people and go to a podium, and you can tell them one fun story, an adventure that you've lived that would humanize you and put you in a different light. Jumping out of an airplane, the first concert you went to, the best baseball game or football game. What would you tell that room?
I was with a fellow, I talked to him yesterday by the name of Mike McKenna. And Mike and I, he's a Brit, and we were over in Japan together. And we get there, and I speak a little bit of the language, and Mike doesn't speak any of it. He speaks British. So he says, take me down and get me something to eat. We're just fresh off the airplane. It's getting dark already. So we're in Tokyo and we walk. He says, like, let's go down that street. And I'm like, dude, that's a back alley. He says, I know, let's go down that. Okay. So we go in this little Japanese restaurant, and Mike's just pointing out, and he's a wild man. He's like, I want that. What that guy's having, I want that. And so anyway, we order our food, and it comes in, and the name of the order that he got was dancing shrimp. And so they put these little shrimp in front of him on a thing of ice, and I get a little bit of fish, and this is kind of like the hors d'oeuvres, And when you're in Japan, especially if you're from the States, you have to understand that the furniture's smaller. So you kind of
Yep.
got to squeeze your legs underneath the table a little bit and sit a little bit sideways and cockeyed, and all of a sudden that shrimp pops up and jumps. And when the shrimp jumped, I jumped. And when I jumped, my knee hit the table, the bottom of the table, and everything goes up in the air. Now, fortunately, Mike was sitting there and he grabbed his plate and I grabbed a hold of mine, and everything, we didn't break anything.
Yeah, right.
And Mike calls the waiter over and he's like, how do I eat this? This is like alive.
Yeah.
And the guy said, do it like this and suck the head and bite the tail and away you go. And Mike, being a proper British man, he pulled it apart and sucked the head and bit the tail and he threw his head back and he said, freshest shrimp I've ever had.
That's awesome. That's a great
Not a
story.
victory, but it's certainly a lesson.
Yeah, it certainly is. So, of all of these adventures, of everything you've accomplished and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, wow. Um, I think telecommunications against trafficking and exploitation is a no-cost training program that we've put together. Another guy from Sacramento and I put together, along with a company, a nonprofit called Three Strands Global Foundation. And what we do is we teach people to recognize human trafficking and then how to just put it in your phone and dial the human trafficking hotline.
Yeah,
And all the things that I've been involved in, there's another one called the Tower Family Foundation. Um, all these efforts have been to come alongside the most vulnerable in our society.
yeah,
And when you help someone who can do nothing to help you back, it shows me a lot about your heart.
yeah.
And those are the things that I treasure and value the most across all the, 40 plus years in business, man. And I'm looking back and I'm going, I didn't waste any time helping people who could not help themselves.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, Jim, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, colleagues, everyone that gets your book, everyone that knows you, but you run
Yeah.
the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Wow. Um, I would love to say that I'm the guy who will be there if you need me. And I think that if there's a calling to leaders today, it is to, I mean, if I go back, especially to my work experience, if you go to a large percentage of the people who I've ever worked with, you're going to find out that he's fair. He's kind of a hard nose sometimes, but he loves us. And I think the most important component in American business that's missing today is if you don't love your people, you got to go back and rekindle the thought that says they're paying your house payment because they're the ones actually doing the work. They're feeding your family. They are giving up their valuable time and they're carving out all of their efforts, their best efforts, so you can be a hero. Well, wow, what kind of selfless, cool stuff is that?
That's totally cool. So talk to me a little bit about your book Building Men. Give me an abstract. Get people out there to order a copy.
Okay, some people are ordering. Man, I was just shocked in parenting with Father's Day coming up. It just
Yeah.
came up on a bestseller, and I'm like, what? So that's pretty cool. But all it is stories. It's just a collection of stories about those people, starting with my grandpa and ending with my even my kids, of people who invested in me and built me. And there's a whole host of people in there. There's teachers, there's pastors, there's guys I worked with who played practical jokes on me. There's pilots. I mean, there's a big aviation sector in my life that has been a passion and a servant for lots of different things. So, Building Men is a collection of stories about the way I hope people are going to treat you if you're a young man.
So if anybody wants to pick up a copy, they want to reach out to you, any of the good business in your world, where's the best place to go?
Well, if you want to get the book is sold anywhere you buy books, so Barnes and Noble, Amazon, whatever. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can go to my website is the Grampion, Grampion, thegrampion.com. And my grandson Wes named me that, and I wear that moniker with pride.
That's
So
great, man. What a great
yeah,
nickname. Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim, this has been wonderful. I'm so glad that we had the chance to reconvene, arc together, share
Oh
the
man,
stories. Thank you, sir.
my pleasure. Thank you. It's been an honor.
And good luck with it. Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.